Hello, and welcome to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. Well, this is our map day where we get to go into all kinds of fun information about our topic for the week. And so without any further ado, I'm going to send it right over to Victoria. Victoria?
Okay, everybody, welcome back. So, as I said in the introduction yesterday, we've looked at some of the major key players that upon whose shoulders a story is carried. They drive the action forward, they contribute to the plot, and they ultimately have their own character arcs, which means they change or evolve in some way over the course of your story. There are, however, lots of other smaller characters that sometimes don't really serve any major purpose, but they're just as important. So let's break down a few of those and see how you might go about using them. It's important to remind you, put these on your note cards because these are the pieces from which you will pull details so that when you're writing or you need one of these characters, you think, ooh, I remember a red shirt is one, I could use that one. So we'll get to that in a second, but get these on your cards. So when I talked to you originally about the antagonist, one of those kinds of characters that came up is something called an antagonist by proxy. So remember when we said maybe you've got a villain and you don't want to introduce him right away. So instead you're going to have his henchmen heckle or somehow attack your main guy. So you get a little bit of the flavor of the villain, but it comes through this henchman, this side character, this proxy character. Let's look a little deeper into that concept. Another kind of antagonist by proxy could be a situation. It could be a particular event or something that a more major character has to respond to. It could be a system, like an authority, like maybe it's the characters against the government or against the politicians or something like that. But when you start to get down into those smaller side characters, what does that look like? Well, remember, an antagonist doesn't always have to be evil. They don't always even have to be bad. They just have to represent some kind of speed bump or problem in the progress of the more major characters. So, for example, when I mentioned red shirt, what is a red shirt? Anybody of a certain age remembers the show Star Trek. You may recall in the Star Trek shows, when they needed a character to accidentally get blown up or accidentally get kidnapped and killed, they don't want it to be the main characters because they can't sacrifice those. We just need a guy that you kind of maybe know his name and like, and oof, he's the one that gets bumped off. In the show, that character was always dressed in a red uniform shirt rather than the standard uniform of the Star Trekkies. So you knew when you saw the red shirt, yeah, this guy's getting bumped off. Well, that can be an important minor role that you can incorporate. Always keep a red shirt in your back pocket. It can be a side person. It could be a side pet, an animal. It could be a thing like maybe a prized possession that gets stolen or gets lost, and that moves the story forward. So always be thinking of those little details that you can use as touch points to move the story. Maybe it's a red shirt. Maybe it's an attitude. Someone has a certain belief or a thought, and that attitude stands in their way, and that gets challenged, and solving the challenge moves them along. There's a million ways you can do with this. I would encourage you to keep a list of the kinds of things that you could challenge these more major characters with that could just be a subtle inconvenience. So a final example of what that might look like. What if you use a temptation or something that distracts them or leads them astray? That's a great use for these very minor characters. It can be a clerk at the grocery store that takes too long to check someone out, thereby that someone misses their bus or misses their major appointment, and that's the key plot point. The clerk just played a little side role in making sure that they were delayed, but it's an important role in order to make it believable. So that's where you're looking for those side minor characters, those antagonists or antagonists by proxy. Sometimes it's called a contagonist. It just means that they're not a major event, a major plot point. They're just a little side thing that gives them a bump that helps you move that story along. The last thing I'll say about that is it needs to be subtle, right? Never step over the line of what we call deus ex machina or the ghost in the machine. It's what I like to refer to as the magic pterodactyl. Your major characters are in the thick of it. They're challenged. They don't know what to do. There's no answer to hand. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes a magic pterodactyl and saves the day. Number one, your readers are going to be very angry with you because that's cheating. Number two, you're a better writer than that. Work harder than the magic pterodactyl. And number three, don't just throw in a little side character who magically solves the problem or provides the answer, or even worse, give a coincidence that solves the problem or gives them the answer. Again, all reasons that your readers will be mad at you. Instead, do your author's work, make out that running list of ideas and concepts and potential things that you could throw at a character. Just those little things like the clerk that takes too long, or being stuck in traffic, or the fact that they lost their glasses and couldn't see. Those could all be great minor problems, but they help move the story along just the same. So my advice to you, start those antagonist note cards and keep a running list of all of those little things, those little annoyances that you can use to poke those major characters to keep your story moving along. So with that, I will throw it back over to Kathleen so she can talk character traits.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. I like the idea of having some very important side characters keep your story in the direction you want it to go and surprise your reader with where you're taking them. Well, I'm going to be talking about the character trait of meekness. Now, if you're thinking about meekness in the common use of the term, you're thinking of somebody, oh, timid and shy, and, oh, don't call on me, don't notice me. But that's not meekness at all. Meekness is a balance trait. Now, remember, a balance trait has two possible ways to lose. You've got to be right in the middle to be unbalanced, to be straight with a balance trait. But also, a balance trait has to do with the character's relationship with himself. We talked of courage is talking about the relationship with the physical world. When we're talking about insight, we're talking about the intellect and being able to perceive and understand. When we're talking about empathy, we're talking about the character's relationship with other characters. But when we're talking about balance, it's the character's relationship with himself. And meekness is a balance trait. And meekness describes more than anything else where the character places his focus. And we're talking this time about, is he looking out of his eyes to the world around him, or is his eyes focused inward and he's looking at himself? So that is what we really need to think about when we're thinking about the concept of meekness. Meekness is where he's getting his focus. Now, once you know that a little bit, you can sort of tie it to the popular conception of the term meek, because maybe if the person is totally inwardly focused, he might not want the outer world coming to interact with him. But it has an awful lot to do with another concept that we talk about in common parlance, where it's very close to the meaning. And that is your character other-centered or self-centered? I'll tell you one thing, it is virtually impossible to construct an other-centered villain. Think about it. Any character that you can devise who's focused on the needs of others, can it possibly be a villain? Can it possibly be someone who wants to take advantage of them? So that is a very, very good way early on when you first introduce your villain, or maybe when you introduce the villain by proxy, you might find out that you can show very quickly that he only cares for his own gain, and show him judging a situation where maybe there's somebody who's in genuine peril, and he's looking at that and he's saying, now, the guy's about to have his car fall off the bridge. Ah! And he's thinking, oh, great. Now the traffic's tied up and I'm going to be late to my dinner. Now you know this guy has a bad focus and you're going to watch out for him. When he starts courting your female focus, your female heroine, your audience is going to be saying, no, don't believe him. Don't trust him. And maybe they won't even know why, but their stomach is going to turn up in knots. They might not even remember that thought that you let him expose in chapter 2, but they're going to know right away that no, not him. So these characters can be really, really powerful in your story. Now we have to talk a little bit about, of course, what causes the character's focus. to wrap inward on himself. And many times we can think of a character who has suffered some damage in life. And we've looked at the other two character traits that have some relationship to this, honesty and humility. And we remember, if you remember when we talked about humility, it's the concept that the human person has its own net worth, and therefore the only thing that you have to look at to determine that a human person has value is that they're a human person. Done, all accomplished in one. So if you have a character who can't accept their own self-worth, then that character is going to have possibly be very wrapped inward, because they're always going to be frightened of anything that might unbalance their very fragile sense of self. So those two will often go together. But when we come to the writing week, we'll give you a few prompts, because sometimes things that always go together can make for very interesting stories when we break them apart. So what we're going to be looking for in the coming week is, when we talk about loss and victory, we're going to talk about what does meekness sound like in your character's head? What does meekness look like in a scene where the focus, the point of view is outside of the character? How can you still see what's going on in terms of meekness? But that's for next week. For now, I just want you to focus. Become aware of where your character's focus is. Every time you create a character, ask yourself, what's he focused on? Where is his, does he have blinders on? Does he focus inward? Take a look at that and start building out some character cards that typify the character trait of meekness. Anything to add, Victoria?
Oh, as always, this one spectacular. Chef's kiss. So good. And I had an aha moment, which is so great, because every time we talk about the character traits in this context, I always learn something new about them, which I love. I was thinking about that thing that I love so much, which is, what if your character is doing the wrong thing for the right reason, or the right thing for the wrong reason? Using the technical definition of meekness, which I love the fact that we distinguish between the common usage and the technical usage, because it really helps you dial in those character traits. But wow, I can't wait to play with that. What if you start to toggle what that villain is doing? Maybe they're saving the village and the villagers think, oh, he's so great, but he's doing it out of vengeance, which is not so great. I don't know, lots of cool stuff to play with there. So make those note cards, guys, and start playing with these ideas and thinking about your characters in the context of the traits, and then come on over to LiLLiPub and join us, because that's where we share every Saturday in our workshop what we're working on, what we're writing, and we talk to each other about these kinds of ideas.
Yep. Like Victoria said, come on over to LiLLiPub.org. We'd love to see you, and we continue this conversation in various chat rooms over in LiLLiPub.org. See you there. Bye-bye.